right. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live coaching call with Nito Marketing. So we are now in phase 2 of creating your story. So we have, we'll have 3 of these where we go, we're going to do the introduction, and then we're going to show you how to do what we introduced. And then next week, we're going to do a workshop. So for those of you that have been able to kind of follow along this program, make sure you bring what you have next week because we're really just going to hash it out. And we've got Patience here today who's going to show us how to write your story with an amazing tool that we introduced to you last week called StoryBrand. So welcome, Patience. We're so happy you're here.
Hi, good to be back.
Yeah, so we've got a couple live attendees. So again, as usual, if you've got any questions, chat in as we're going through this. We always love to have your thoughts and your ideas and see where we're at. But without further ado, I'm going to let you take it away, Patience.
Yeah, great. And I'm going to actually go ahead and remind me. I'm so sorry. I'm going to share my screen, but I'm just trying to remember how I do that on Zoom.
On the bottom, you can do. There should be a share. It's a green button.
Share. Okay. So yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. I got StoryBrand all queued up to go. So that is, I think Stephen was on the call last week, right? Was that?
Yeah, so what he did, Patience, he gave us a really good rundown of what a story looks like and the elements of a story, and he was able to give us ideas for each one. And today what we're going to go through is just each step and kind of show us how to go through each step.
Perfect. Yeah. So I have, and you can actually, people who are watching online right now, you can pull up mystorybrand.com. This is a completely free resource from StoryBrand, and it's sort of like I don't know, in elementary school I used to have sort of outlines like this to write stories, so it's pretty similar, and it's a really great way to get you to sort of follow along with, I think, what Stephen was talking about last week. So I have it pulled up. You can see it, right? We can see my screen right now, mystorybrand.com, and we have this fun outline. So I think we can start with a character, which some people get confused here. The character is not you, the school. It is the character is the main character of your story, your parents, essentially. I would say we can agree here. It's a parent who is the lead focus of our story. So a character, what do they want? What do your customers want as it relates to your product or service? So I actually encourage you to get pretty detailed here. You can get pretty deep. It doesn't just have to be a parent of a X age child. You can get into where they live, what types of jobs they have, how much money they make. But I don't know if we sort of want to go through this together, Deneen, if you have an idea of a Montessori parent who is our main character. If we want to we don't have to fill it out if we don't want to, but
yeah, no, I think it's good to go back and forth on this. So I imagine a character it's not necessarily a Montessori parent, it's a parent. Yeah, and they, the problem that they have, which I know we will lead into, but I think it goes hand in hand because you have to identify the problem along with the character. Mm-hmm. So, it's parents that are looking for a good place to put their children while they go to work, or they do other things. So that is the key piece, is just, it's a parent looking for childcare.
Yeah, great. So yeah, a parent who wants a good school for their child or children, probably child, right? Is that sort of more often the case with prospective families? Is it just sort of, I'm curious with Montessori, and if the parents generally, if they have one student involved, it's probably less of a search if they have a second child coming along, I would imagine.
Usually you get parents that with their first child.
Yeah.
And
And we
then,
know how great
as they're in, then of course they enroll their second child in. Sometimes though, you have parents that are moving across the country, and then they're relocating and looking at your area. So they may have two children. So.
Yeah, perfect. Great. So super simple start. We have a parent who wants a good school for their child. So the next step of our story brand is what is the problem of our main character here? And they sort of break it up here into a villain, external, internal, and philosophical. I tend to think it is best to start with just like a big main problem, which would be, they need a school. That's a pretty pretty large issue that we can sort of break down into smaller, more internal issues, which I think Stephen sort of talked about that, the issue of, it expands beyond needing a school. It's also a fear of wanting to do the right thing. And perhaps there's a societal pressure that a parent's feeling to just find the best school for your kid. And, there's all these micro problems. So I think we can agree that the first problem would just be to find a good school for your kid. But let's see, external, what's a problem that your customers deal with, parents deal with as it relates to your product or service? That would be the big idea, needing a school. Internal, how is this villain making your customers feel? So that's more of the deep empathy that we're trying to get to with these parents. Deneen, do you have any insight into perhaps the inner struggle that prospective families might be feeling when they're looking for a school for their child?
Mm-hmm. So I'm actually going to speak from my own experience.
Yeah.
I have an almost 6-year-old and an almost 2-year-old. And of course, I was one of the lucky ones to really find Montessori before I became a parent. So I already knew to go to a Montessori school. But my second child, we don't have NIDO programs near us, which is a big bummer. It was like, I love to have infant programs around, and they're amazing, but we just didn't have that. And so I was going around looking for childcare for my 1-year-old at the time. And it was really hard as I was touring different places. And again, I feel biased because I'm trained and I know what an environment can be for a child. But what was so hard is that it felt off to me. And I imagine that for families that, aren't as familiar with Montessori, but walk into an environment that just feels like child managey, like you're managing children. They're not actually growing and developing children. So it's like, the ratios are important. And that's one of the key pieces, and the cleanliness and the safety. And parents want so much more than that.
Yeah.
But if they don't know that there's another option out there, then they usually just pick the best one that they can find. So confusion is a huge piece where they just don't know how to choose a program that works best for their child. But even just confusing on how they feel about it. Because like you said, there's societal pressure about making the right choice for your child. You interact with parents all the time, like other parents, fellow parents, and you're conversing about that and trying to figure out what the best place is for your child and what does that actually mean and look like.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, from my own experience, it was really, really hard. We ended up going with a nanny because it's like, I prefer that over, what I had observed. And that worked well for our family. And so little side tip for Montessorians, if you're actually prospecting, don't forget about the nanny families. If they're looking for nannies, like that's a good pull in to your school and a narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely helpful. Helpful on two fronts as a Montessorian, but also as a parent, you have a unique perspective there. So there's the confusion. Holy heck, it's super overwhelming. There's so many options, and I feel this pressure to do the right thing. first and foremost for my child, but also because we can't really escape that pressure that you feel as a parent. It's everywhere, and it's overwhelming. So these parents, not only when they're looking for a school, just need a school, that's their problem. It goes beyond that. There's the internal struggle of, and perhaps this is something that everyone who's watching right now, you can expand upon. Obviously, all of these things that we're going through right now, you can expand on. But just try and think of what these parents are thinking and feeling beyond just needing a school. What are their fears, concerns? What makes their problem something that they're thinking about at night that is causing them to not be able to sleep, philosophical. So I don't think Stephen really touched on this one last week a whole lot because it is pretty layered, but why is it just plain wrong for your customers to be burdened by this problem? I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. It kind of all expands on those internal struggles that we talked about.
I do. I actually have a pretty strong opinion on this, if you don't mind me sharing.
Yes.
And it has to do with a consumer in this space.
Sure.
And again, as a parent, as I was looking for a program for my child, one, I was put off by how incredibly expensive it is for what you get. And so it felt to me very wrong. Like,
yes.
Like you are charging me basically a mortgage to put my child in this environment that doesn't really help them flourish. And that right there, I mean, I think Montessorians, we need to remember that this is what parents and families are experiencing. And if they don't know any better, if they don't know that you exist, or don't know much about you, maybe just a teeny bit of Montessori, we're not helping these families that absolutely see, well, it's, I guess my only option, right? And when you look at it, actually, most Montessori programs are comparable to the expensive programs, and sometimes even less. And look what we offer. So I know in this process, what it will also help you do is help you craft the value of your program, because that is going to be the key to making sure that you're competitive in this process. But I feel like it is so wrong for parents to pay for something that's just not, it's convenient for sure, right? It's probably on the way to work. They get reports every day of like where their child is at and what they're doing, but it isn't right for the child. And I think we need to bring that out in our messaging much more than we ever have, because of digital marketing and how the narrative is so controlled by the digital world right now.
Sure.
So that's my soapbox. I'm gonna get off it.
No, that's so helpful. And I think we can all agree that childcare, it's a real struggle. It's expensive for what, that's, as a parent too, that's your most precious, it's your most precious investment is your child. And to feel like we would pay as parents, you would pay whatever it takes. Right. But if you don't feel like it's worth the money, and it's like salt in the wound. So, great point. That is why this parent probably feels so wronged. Great point there. Thank you, Janine.
Sorry, I also want to mention, so for those of you on the call, you can do this with us. So the link that the mystorybrand.com, you can actually just put this out and put what you have for your story. So literally we're creating the story along with you. We're just brainstorming ideas, but this is something you can do along with us. And I recommend doing it now, because I know you guys, your worlds are super busy. So do it now, and then you can come back to it next week when we really brainstorm and workshop with you.
Yes. Yeah. So mystorybrand.com. This is super easy. You just pull that up and you'll have this little outline that's really helpful. And again, what we're doing here is we are crafting your narrative. So, and I know most people probably saw Stephen's talk last week, but before you can really find these parents, these prospective parents for, for outreach, you need to make sure that that your story is clear, because like Stephen said last week, no one is going to trust you or set up a tour, call you, be interested in your school if they don't understand who you are. And so what we're trying to do now is just clarify your message and make it, we're centering it around the parent. The parent's the main character here, they're the hero. And we're clarifying what your role is in this story and your school. And this is just a really great way, mystorybrand.com, to figure out what your message is, because sometimes it's so hard when we're, this close to our story every day as a Montessorian. You're so invested in it that it's hard to take a step back and be clear about what you do and why you're so great. So we have a main character who is the parent. They have a problem, which is they need a school for their child, but more specifically, their problem is that it's really confusing to find the right school. They don't know how they feel. They're perhaps overwhelmed with options, and a lot of the options aren't that impressive, but they are almost all expensive. They want to do the right thing for their child, and they also are a little, perhaps secretly, worried about judgment from other people in society. That's a deeper fear there. And so this is when enter your Montessori school. They meet a guide. So in this story, you are the guide. Your school is the guide. And so the guide's job here is to both empathize, which is super easy for Montessorians. We empathize with this parent and the struggles they have, but also we have some authority here. Not only do we understand your problems, but we can also help you because blank. This is what we're filling in here. So first and foremost, we empathize with how you feel. We empathize with the fact that you're confused, you're overwhelmed, and you want the best for your child. I don't know if there's any other empathy notes you have, Janine, for the school here.
I feel like Montessori schools do a really good job of this, obviously, because the empathy and the authority piece, because there's just no comparison to what we do when it comes to a scientifically based method of helping children develop into who they're supposed to be. So the empathy piece that we could include in that, and speak more specifically to, because again, this process helps you pull out the problems that the family is dealing with, not necessarily society, which of course is built into the philosophy that we run. That's what Dr. Montessori really built all of this on, is that we want a better world. But we're speaking specifically to the character. So empathizing, like, we know that you're struggling with understanding the value of what you're getting and what you're paying for when when you've got childcare. We know that it's confusing. I always view Montessori schools as being the light in this community. It's the light in the darkness of this crazy amount of confusion. If you can summarize that, you're a content writer, so you're doing a good job.
I'm doing it. It's hard. It's fine. We're
well, as Montessorians, we talk a lot, and I am one of them.
No, it's a lot too. I mean, like you said, Montessorians are very empathetic, so there's a lot you understand. Like, I understand you're looking for the right school. I understand it's scary, it's overwhelming. The struggle piece here, so obviously, like, again, if you're doing this on your own, watching live, like, you can do a better job than I'm doing right now. I'm just trying to sort of outline here, but you're struggling to find the right school for your child. It's scary, overwhelming. And
is it worth it? I mean, that's the big question I think many of them have. Yeah. Is it worth the money?
Is it worth it? Absolutely. So we understand XYZ. Authority piece. This is where we're like, okay, we understand all of these things, but this is how we can help you. And your authority is sort of like the proof of your experience, your excellence, what makes you so great. But again, you don't want to talk too much about all the things that make you wonderful, because if we give your character here like a couple of nuggets that just address those empathy notes, that's all we have to do right now. You don't have to say like, well, we do these wonderful things and our classrooms are set up this way so your child can develop like this way, and we also do this other thing, and it becomes too much for it's too much information. The bowling balls, right? That's what Stephen was saying last week. It's, you're giving them too many bowling balls to hold on to, they're going to just drop it and leave. So we want to think of a really concise answer to their concerns, why you are the answer, and they should continue along this journey with you. And this is when it starts to get hard, I think, especially for Montessorians, to be like, oh boy, how do we put everything we do into like one sentence? And I'm going to look at you, Deneen, and see if
I knew you were going to do that. See, I'm like trying to figure it out.
And see, we can.
I mean, what's that?
I was going to say, and we can also, it doesn't have to be one sentence to start. We can like throw a bunch of, we're just spitballing here. We can throw a couple of ideas out there, and then we can sort of like narrow it down a little bit. But yes.
Well, a lot of the key phrases I continue to see around is just that we understand independence as a necessary skill to be successful in life. I mean, it's really about the life skills that we're continuing to cultivate. So, you know, independence, empowerment, persistence, confidence. I always come back to those pieces and how we can speak to that particularly. Because again, looking at our competition, their authority is that they offer a safe environment, they offer a stimulating environment, which I can argue with, but they also, you know, offer consistency. So really that's the authority in the space that they have. Now, our benefit is that we truly are building the skills for life. And so if we can figure out that authority piece and really speak to it. So independence, confidence, empowerment. I know I see you thinking.
Well, so no, you're making really great points. So, so the main concerns we talked about, you know, you're looking for the best for your student. That correlates to what you were just saying. They want the best for their child. We offer the best for your child's development. Scientifically backed. Like, they're not only is it just like a good environment, it's a great place for development for your child because of the reasons you said. The other concern, so that was just wanting the best for your child. The other concern was, is it worth the money? To which I think you can, you know, I think a lot, you mentioned that you ended up going with a nanny, and if I remember correctly, there are a lot of Google searches comparing Montessori with nanny care. And I know that, you know, that's just for the very early developmental stages for a child, but you could probably speak to the individualized attention that, along with the, you know, the clean environment, the way the classrooms are put together, there are all these, we could probably speak to the money, the concern for how expensive it is as well in our not in our authority here. So I was trying to think of a way to address each of those main concerns we mentioned up here. So you're struggling to find the right school, it's scary, overwhelming, and expensive. Is it worth it? And that's why I was thinking while you were talking, because you're making good points. So how do we narrow that down? So you had mentioned, so remind me what the main, you foster independence, lifelong independence, confidence, a lifelong love of learning, that they'll carry on throughout the rest of their lives, obviously. And I think a big thing to speak to also is just that they're safe and they're in a safe place, and that's really important. I would imagine as an authority figure here, speaking to a parent, like your child is in a safe place, and not just safe, but it is fostering further development beyond what other schools could offer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to try to word that.
Yeah. See, this can't be done in 10 minutes.
No,
Like it has to be,
no,
it has to be that kind of really deep process. Another thing I was thinking too in this is that a lot of parents want their children to make sure that their needs are met when they need to be met. And that's what Montessorians are really good at, actually great at. So that's another piece. Like, will my child get what they need at the time that they need it? And so that's another thing. I know we don't have this in the list, but that's something that we can be authoritative on in this process is absolutely, and here's how we do it.
right.
I mean, and that's an invite to come schedule a tour for sure.
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, hands down, one of the key pieces of what we offer.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, this is the hard part because there's so much authority there. And to narrow it down without overwhelming the parent is challenging. And we won't be able to do it right now just because we're just sort of talking back and forth. But as the people who are here right now watching and watching later on, just something to think about. We list out the struggles of this parent. We empathize with them, and then in our authority, we want to answer only those concerns. There's so much that we could talk about, but that's something for later on when they are taking a tour or when you get a chance to talk to them more. Start small. We can go from there, but just speak to those points of empathy and how you are the answer, and we'll go from there. So the next job of the guide is to give these parents a plan. So this part might be a little bit confusing on the surface. What we're doing here, because it says there's process and agreement. So the process is 3 to 4 steps your customer can take that would lead them to a sale. This is like a super salesy way to talk about this. But basically, 3 to 4 ways for this prospective parent to enroll their child in your school. Now, I think on the surface, we can probably say that the path to enrollment would be to, the first point of contact to schedule a tour, to apply. I don't know if I'm missing any other big milestones, other than an initial point of contact, scheduling a tour, and then just applying to enroll. Are there any other giant?
Well, it kind of depends on how each school structures it. So schedule a tour sometimes includes an observation and it sometimes doesn't. But an observation is absolutely an action item that a prospective parent needs to go through so that they can have the time in the classroom to really absorb what's being offered.
Right.
And another step could be come to an open house, come to an event that we're attending. And if you have a very ambitious administration team, think about doing webinars like this. If you could have maybe a 2 to 3 series of a webinar that just explains, it talks about preparing children for a changing world. That's one of my favorite topics. And it's a key piece to the parents fear right now because they don't know what the world's going to be like. We don't know what the world is going to be like when our children are adults. So that's a constant fear. If you can make webinars 5-6 minutes long, like it doesn't even have to be that long, and you invite prospective parents and you can put a campaign out there, that can be another action item where they don't have to really invest too much, but they can get to know you. So that can be like a lead in as well. So that's just a thought. But absolutely, contacting, scheduling a tour, observation, I'd put in there somewhere.
Okay.
And then open houses, any events that you've got, absolutely.
Okay. So yeah, obviously, and this is why it's important to do it yourself too, because every school is different. Your path to enrollment is going to be slightly different. But we do want to make sure we're keeping it just to 3, maybe 4 steps. 3 is ideal. 3 steps to enrollment without making them feel like they're committing right away. So that's, I think we can all empathize with that moment in the process before spending money on something or committing to something, where all of a sudden it's real. We just went from being like, I'm this parent, I have this problem. Oh, wow, this school may be a great option. We don't want to scare them by being like, commit now. We want to ease them into the process. It can't be too much work. It can't be too committing right away. Just a nice, gentle introduction to who you are. So contact, schedule a tour, observation, apply. These steps will obviously vary depending on your school.
Schools do have this in place, and some of them do also explain it on their website. They can call it the admissions process as well. But it's a good reminder to keep it to 3, 4 at the most, just because if you look at, and I mean, it kind of depends on your program too. If you've got a giant waiting list, then that process going through can maybe be a little bit more extensive as you really select your families. But keeping it simple, easy, and actionable for prospects to see that and digest it. Again, the goal is we don't want to confuse parents and prospects. Remember, if you confuse, you lose. And even in just this plan, because we know parents are bombarded with information and they're confused on what to do. And so oftentimes they will make a choice based on when they are the clarity of what's being offered. And if we confuse them even in just this process, we're going to lose them.
Yes. Yeah, perfect. Exactly. Yeah. And also we are visual beings. When we look at a website, we like to see very neat 1, 2, 3. That makes our brain so happy when we see on a website, these are the things you have to do. And it's it's outlined there for you. It's not too overwhelming. That's the end goal here, is to have your website, have a section on your website that has these 3 steps here, making your brain happy and not have to burn too many calories, right? That's what was part of it. If you work too hard. So along with the process that we talked about, we also want to make an agreement with these parents. And I don't know if like agreement is necessarily I guess it's the right way to put it, but also I also like to think of it as like words of comfort for the parent, like what you're going to tell them that like alleviates their understandable concerns before committing to you, like in a way saying like, look, this is how you apply, but we are XYZ. Like what are we going to say to make them feel comfortable to schedule that tour, to perhaps enroll their child along the way. And I think, again, Montessorians are really good at this, because that does stem from empathy, being like, we understand your concerns. I don't want to say hesitations, but it's human to be a little standoffish about committing right away. So
Patience, what if we did something like, you're going to have, by the end of this process, you're going to have a very clear idea of who we are, and you're going to choose if you want to enroll. And because I think, when you apply, obviously that's a pretty big indicator that you're wanting to enroll. But even when you apply, there's still that like question. And I'm not sure if those that are attending live, if you've had that experience where someone has applied, you'd offered the spot, and they're like, well, actually, I already, enrolled in a different school or something. So an application doesn't necessarily mean they're going to enroll. There's that phase that from applying to enrollment, there's also that relationship building and that questioning. So an agreement in this process is, at the end of this, you're going to know who you are. It's going to be really clear, if you want to move forward in that. And if you make that agreement, look back and see what it is you're doing in this process that really clarifies for them. Are there some improvement opportunities along with your tour process? Is there a script that you can go through and make sure that you do every time you do a tour? Because sometimes what we end up doing is like, well, we bring them through this, and this, but we may have forgotten to touch on this topic or this topic or this topic because the conversation organically went. And while it is lovely to build that relationship, I also think where it's a missed opportunity because we're not being clear enough to who we are. And then they apply and we are surprised to find out that they don't want to actually enroll.
Right.
And so I think having a clear process for your staff, if you have multiple people giving tours or if you're that person, just reminding ourselves that we need to go through that so that it is clear for them when they go through that, and they can make that decision much easier through that.
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, and again, don't copy what I'm writing because it could be a lot better. But yeah, that's a really great point. And take your time while you're going through this to really think about a nice, concise way to settle their nerves. That's sort of what we're getting at here. Is here's how you apply, the steps that you take. But hey, don't be worried. Like this, then think on that for a little bit longer than I did. But there's plenty to say. But so now we sort of gave them this plan. This is basically, we're telling them what to expect because not only do people are not going to spend their money or trust you with their children if they don't know what to expect. And that's just universally true with anything. No one's going to spend their money if they don't know what they're getting. And that includes not just the final product, but also, the process to get there. So we want to make sure we're really clear with, this is our plan. This is how you, this is what we do. This is how you apply. Let us settle your nerves really quickly. We understand it's a little scary right now, but call to action. So this is where we're at right now. I'm gonna take a leap here and say that for most Montessori schools, I think the direct call to action would be to schedule a tour. Would you say that's right? Okay.
Yeah, you want to get them in the door. That's for sure.
Yeah. So we're going to have a call to action that's going to be a big button that says schedule a tour. Now that's our direct call to action. That's us being like, hey, take this leap, let's do it. But we also want a transitional call to action, which is sort of, again, like the easing the nerves side. We have the process and the agreement. Now we have like a direct call to action and a transactional call to action. So the transactional is like, hey, you want to learn a little bit more first? That's what this call to action is. So it's still going to be like a button telling them to do something on your website. We still want them to take a little leap, but it's for those parents who are not quite committed yet. It feels a little scary to just schedule a tour. So
I know. Do a webinar.
Do a webinar.
Yes. I just like, I would love for Montessorians to come out of the woodwork a little bit more and be, online and on camera. That was one of my biggest learning curves working with Nito, and I've been with Nito for over a year now. And it's amazing how much when you're out there, you can really capture a big population. So definitely webinar for that transitional one. You could just, if you're not ready to come in, here's, a quick 3-4 minute video with 3 different series of whatever, and you've got it here and they're on here, and they're able to kind of check it out on their own time, in their own way, without too much commitment. It's absolutely free. And at the end of it, you can give them something like traditional versus Montessori. Boom. They've got that in front of them, and then they can come back and schedule a tour if they're, obviously that's a sales process, but then you can kind of get that. So I imagine the transitional is supposed to feed the customer back into your primary call to action. So think of it that way. If you're not up for webinars, what other transitional thing can you do to get them to schedule a tour?
Yeah. So what we're looking for here is we're still looking to engage them. We still want them to be learning more about you. We're trying to push them a little bit further along, but it's for the people like me, and I think a lot of us who I'm very wary of everything all the time online. Like that's just, perhaps it's my generation. I don't know. I am certainly more likely to do more of the transitional approach. So if I have a chance to learn a bit more first, I'm going to probably do that before committing to schedule a tour. Not every parent, if you address their problems, you give them a great plan. If you've set all that up, hopefully you don't have to do the transitional, you don't have to worry about them only doing the transitional and dropping off. Hopefully they'll just commit to scheduling a tour. But we do want to be sensitive to those parents who are just a little wary. So a free webinar would be amazing. I was just, again, brainstorming here. There's lots of options, but if you have like a virtual tour so they can see, I think the Montessori classrooms are so amazing. And some parents may be introverts and not super wanting to like go into a public place and like go on a physical tour. Maybe easing them in by like showing them just what the classroom looks like. I think that's a great selling point. Video, people love videos. If you have a video that just sort of like teaches them a little bit more about who you are, even just like a button that is like, give us a call, email us do you have a question? Email us. We're happy to answer any questions you have. We're happy to chat. Lots of options here, and you can get creative and have a lot of fun with it too. So good ideas there.
One thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about call to actions too is that you want a really good mix of very little commitment to a big commitment. And what I mean by that is you can have videos on your website, but you also should have other things where, like other forms that families have to fill out, so you're collecting their information. Because otherwise you've got a transitional call to action, but you don't know who's taking advantage of that. And then they schedule a tour. And how amazing would it be if when somebody schedules a tour, you're able to track what transitional pieces, call to actions you have out there, so that you can really see what's most effective and you can do more of that. And then you can start to build your marketing from there. But having both, videos already on your website and some other form that they need to fill out in order to get these other transitional actions, that's going to really help you make sure that your efforts are worth it in what you're doing, and that you're building the prospects you need to be building.
Yeah. Yep. And it's super easy to, a free webinar, any sort of a download, things like that. It's very easy to just have them enter their name and email address and move along. We do that all the time. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. So, sorry, my little story, my video's in front of the next step here. Okay, so we call them to action. So this that ends in success. We call them to action that ends in success. So list the positive changes you're parents will experience if they use your product or service. On the surface level, I think we can universally say their child gets the best care and education possible. That's, a very surface level answer to that. But Deneen, I would love to hear you sort of react to what can these parents envision for their future? What are we telling them to visualize once they follow through with their call to action?
Mm-hmm. So I imagine this is right around the time when they choose to enroll or are considering that. So it's either they're about to or they already have.
Very warm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I think one thing to keep in mind when we think about the success of this is not necessarily what their child is going to get out of it, but what peace of mind they're receiving for enrolling your child or their child into your school. I think we make a big leap in saying, there's this amazing education. Your child is going to turn into an amazing human and do awesome things. And yes, we do that. But if we jump to that, we actually miss the story of our character. We miss the true problem we solve now, which we've identified as like we have to find a good place for a child, a safe place, a place that really, knows my child well and meets their needs when they need it. It's that right there that we want to describe clearly so that it actually sets them on a path when they are enrolled in your school for you to build more layers into that relationship that help them understand and nurture them through what we really do offer them in the end for their whole family, because it's a journey. And I think if we jump to the end because we know, that's where the curse of knowledge comes in, where we know so much, and then we talk so much about Montessori, and then we lose parents early on because it's almost like, did you drink the Kool-Aid yet? Like, yes. Come on, like aren't you with us? And they're not yet because we haven't really hooked them in a way that makes them understand exactly what we're talking about. Am I making sense here?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm not getting on my soapbox, but I feel like we really need to be talking about it's a peace of mind for the choice that they made. We're going to be along this journey with you. We're a parenting partner because parenting is hard and it's scary, but we are going to continue to give you that support as we help nurture your child.
Yeah. I love that, parenting partner. That's great. I think you hit the nail on the head though with peace of mind. Isn't that what we want? I feel like that's all we want in life, is just to feel like, I did the right thing. Like I did my due diligence. I feel good. Like that's just what we're all after. And yes, you can go into your child will achieve these wonderful things and they will go on to do these things that are very impressive, which is fine and true. You can do all of that, but I just think if a parent can visualize themselves just feeling content and fulfilled with their decision and knowing that their child is in a good place, I don't know if there's anything greater than that for this whole process. That's the end goal.
And they made an informed decision, through this process. It wasn't just a convenience decision. It was an informed decision. And you helped them through that process.
Yeah.
And I mean, even that alone, parents are going to be like, I love you, because it's like they're always looking for the light. And that's why I keep going back to Montessori schools can be the light in the community, because it is really confusing when you're trying to make that right choice. So empowering the parents and letting them know you've made the right decision, not based on convenience, but based on what's right for you and your family. Mm-hmm. And that's what success looks like. And that puts them on a path to make your job so much easier as you're nurturing them and helping them truly understand what Montessori is. Because we shouldn't be doing that in this process.
Yes.
That's when we confuse them.
Yep. Yeah. And that's sort of, this process is, we're clarifying our message, but we're also kind of like spreading it out. Like that's sort of what we're doing here is like, it's so easy to be at a party with a friend. Tell me about Montessori, blah, 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 blah. You know, it's like there are all these things that we just sort of unload, but this process helps us like spread it out so it's more digestible, easier for the parent to understand. And when parents understand the whole concept of Montessori thoroughly, then they're much more likely to enroll. It's just we need to be very clear through this whole process, and this is helping us sort of spread it out. So that is also really important. We don't want to be talking about this stuff at the very beginning. So that's why it's not until they are very warm and making, scheduling a tour and whatnot. So on the other side, though, we have so that ends in success, but we also, I guess, we don't want to scare them, right? But like there is this whole, it helps them avoid failure. List the negative consequences your parents will experience if they don't apply to a Montessori school. Again, we don't want to be like super, we don't want to lean too hard into this, because, we don't want to lean on the negative too much. But I mean, speaking, Janine, as a parent, like who went through this process of being like, okay, so I don't have a Montessori program. What were the potential failures that you might feel as a parent if you don't follow through?
Well, one of them, I mean, I'm just looking at the list there and I'm doing the opposite. So the piece of mine, the opposite of that is that I made the wrong decision. Yeah. And then you're constantly second guessing your decision. And that does not feel good as a parent. And that was ultimately the reason, I mean, that right there was the reason why I chose to do a nanny. And sometimes I think, if we know too much, we know too much, but it's also really helpful to make that decision. So, regretting the decision that you make, and then constantly dealing with the feeling of not really, the unsettled feeling. That's a perfect word for that. And if you look at parenting partner, what's the opposite of that is you're just disconnected. You're left to do this parenting journey. You're left to do it on your own, which all of it doesn't come with a manual. So we all feel like that at some point, but at least we've got someone, at a Montessori school who understands that journey and what that looks like. And especially where someone can say, this is normal for your child. Don't worry. Like, this is within their developmental range. This is important. And that's what we do, is we really help them. So yeah, you feel disconnected, unsure.
Yeah. I mean, there is this whole concept, right, of we took a village. We used to raise kids within a big community of support, and you'd like to feel like your school is in a way that village for you, or at least a part of that village, and perhaps you're feeling
isolated is a good
one. Isolated, yeah, that's that feeling of disconnect. Lots of the opposites of the success, the feeling unsettled, isolated.
Well, what's interesting too is, as we're writing this, and I have a lot of friends around my age who have 2 to 3 kids around, between 0 and 7. And it's interesting. I mean, I consider myself an empath. Like, I'm able to really sit there and just listen and feel what other people are feeling. And when I'm in the room, I can feel this, like the disconnect and the uncertainty of like where they have their children, and they're just like, oh, I'm not sure. And you can hear it in the tone of their voice. You can hear it. You can see it in their body language. And so this is very real. Among like the parent population, absolutely. And so if we can somehow softly hint at this particular thing, you're going to hit a pain point that no one else is talking about.
Yes.
Like, it's the big elephant in the room, and we're all kind of like looking at each other like, who's going to say it? And I mean, I don't have any advice right now for how to articulate that. And I think I'll probably think a little bit more on how to do that, because I think it's really important. It's an opportunity that we can have.
It is. It is.
But one that we may miss. We don't like to talk about negative things. We like to talk about all the positive stuff.
So I think that's the key there, is like the redirect. So we don't want to talk about, well, these other school programs, they do this thing that we just don't think is an appropriate way to teach, and they have this many students in the room. And so instead of talking about the negative actions that these other competitors, what have you, what they do action wise that's negative, if we're talking more about that like feeling, that's entirely appropriate to speak to that. We understand, we've known many parents who, before coming to Montessori, they felt disconnected with their child's education. They felt like maybe they didn't do the right thing. They felt unsettled. That's entirely appropriate, and I would argue is actually a good thing to speak on, because parents, like you said, they get it. It's really real. Parents feel that. So yeah, we can totally speak on the potential for failure. The way to do it is by touching on those feelings rather than criticizing other institutions. That's
right.
That's just how you go about it. You don't need to be hostile about how other schools run. You just have to speak on that gut feeling, because that's pretty universal. So that's something to think about too. And then the final step is the character transformation. And all we're doing here really is speaking on where the parent is at the very beginning, how they're feeling from the start, and then where they will be after they have applied. So we're kind of going from this first character step all the way to the success step, and we're comparing these two characters who've gone through a transformation. So Deneen, I don't know if you want to sort of reiterate how the character starts, how the parent, generally speaking, starts off in this process, and then how they feel at the end.
Right. So it's really just it's summarizing what it is that we've already done. So this is
pretty much.
Which is awesome. So really, you're going from a confused parent, a unsure parent, untrusting parent, because it's hard to gain their trust, right? Like you've got to figure out that piece too. To a comfortable, trusting, sure, clear, I guess, parent who's making a choice that is right for their child, and they know it.
Yes.
Summarize that for me, Patience. You're really good at the content piece.
Yeah, like I said, this is hard to do. Hopefully, everyone who's watching will really sit down and take a long time. It's kind of fun to do this. Mm-hmm. Take your time doing it. But we're starting off with a parent who's confused, untrusting, worried, unsettled. All of these things just come back to that. I think that gut feeling we can all relate to, just like, oh God, am I making the right decision? Do I know what I'm doing? To a comfortable, trusting parent, fulfilled, settled, right? Like, I think ultimately it goes from being unsettled to settled. That's like the two main gut feelings that we're starting with and ending with. Just feeling like your kid is in a good place, as parents. I think many people can understand that unsettled feeling and how it feels when you feel like your child's in a good place. And obviously we can play around with this more. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything else to add on the character transformation, but you could go on and on. You could do this all day.
And notice too that it's just about feeling.
It
There's
is.
no like action pieces in here, which we carved out earlier in this process, but it's really envisioning from where they started to where they are. And having that awareness alone helps craft your action items and what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, make this character transformation really clear for you. And if there's one thing you walk away from is this, is that you know exactly how your parents are going to transform from needing to make the decision to making the decision to enroll in your school. And if you understand that, you are going to be leaps and bounds ahead of your competition, as well as other Montessori schools, because this is not common practice. There's hints here and there, but having a framework like this will just help you so much in your process of articulating who you are and what you want to do with the families that you have.
Yeah. And if I think another big takeaway, which you touched on as well, is I think it's really easy for us to jump right into the success part. Like, this is what happens when you enroll your student. These are all the amazing things that happen. But that's too early for a prospective parent to hear, like, these are all the wonderful things that will happen when your student applies, and this is all the great things we do. They first and foremost want to know how you're going to address those scary feelings that they're having. Start there. That's and I know it's so hard, but yeah, this is a really great way to pace yourself, which I think we all need help with when we're communicating. So again, this is a really great mystorybrand.com. It's free. It's a great way to find your story, clarify your messaging. Were there any questions or any further comments that we can address?
If you're here and you've got one, make sure to type it in. Any comments too, was this helpful? Were you able to do your process too? Because again, next week we're going to be workshopping this. And I'm really hopeful that you'll bring what you have so we can help you craft this in the way that's really gonna, leak into all of your marketing and all of your messaging. And so Costin will be here next week and we'll do that. So I'd love to know, if you were able to do this or if you plan on doing it as well. If you're watching the recording, bring it next week for sure. That would be awesome to have you guys on. Otherwise, I'm just going to create a hypothetical school and we'll just do it, in my head, like when I plan to open up a school or something. I know. But awesome. Well, thank you, Patience, for walking us through this process and a great conversation and brainstorming session, which I know you are always good for. So we really appreciate having you on here.
Yeah, thanks for you're great in this. This is wonderful. Thanks for having me. It's a blast.
Awesome. All right. Well, good to see you, everyone. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.